Now that we understand both GDP and inflation, it is important to tie them together. GDP is the market value of all final goods and services produced within a country in a year. And there are two ways we can get GDP to go up. We can either produce more goods and services, adding to that total, or we increase the market value of what we are already producing by increasing the price level. When we increase production, we call that economic growth, which is the key ingredient in improving our living standards. When we increase the price level, we call that inflation, which means we've increased GDP without increasing our standard of living at all. So it is important to separate those two effects. We can identify what part of an increase in GDP is due to actual economic growth by calculating real GDP. Since living standards are best measured by GDP per capita, let's calculate that. Here is the data for GDP, or what we'll now call nominal GDP, as well as population, GDP per capita, and the CPI for the US in 1950 and the US in 2020. Nominal GDP, which is the regular value we would calculate for GDP, in 1950 was $300 billion, and in 2020 it was $21 trillion. These are the values for GDP we get using the production approach or the income approach or the expenditure approach. The population in 1950 was 152 million people, while in 2020 we had 330 million people. With these numbers, we can compute GDP per capita. In 1950, $300 billion divided by 152 million people is $1,974 per person. In 2020, $21 trillion divided by 330 million people is $63,636. This is a big increase. Nominal GDP per capita is over 32 times higher in 2020 than in 1950. But a lot of that difference is due to inflation, not an actual increase in living standards. In 1950, the CPI was 24.063, and in 2020, it was 258.844, which is almost 11 times bigger. What we can do is convert GDP per capita in 1950 to 2020 dollars. Essentially, we are figuring out how much all of the goods and services produced in 1950 would sell for in 2020, therefore adjusting the value for inflation. To do this, we take GDP per capita in 1950, which was $1,974, and we multiply it by the ratio of the CPIs in our 2 years. 258.844 goes on top because that's our destination year. We are adjusting to 2020 dollars. That means the 1950 CPI will go in the denominator because it is our starting year. This gives us $21,234.18. What that means is that you would need $21,234.18 in 2020 to buy the same basket of goods and services that they were buying with $1,974 in 1950. We would call this $21,234.18 the real GDP per capita. But if you're wondering why we put things in 2020 dollars and not 1950 dollars, well, that's an option too. If we convert GDP per capita in 2020 to 1950 dollars, this is what we get. $63,636 times the destination year CPI of 24.063 divided by the starting year CPI of 258.844 gives us a real GDP per capita of $5,915.81. That means the basket of goods you can buy with $63,636 in 2020 cost about $5,915.81 in 1950. Note that our real GDP per capita is expressing the GDP in terms of another year's prices, allowing us to compare the actual economic growth between the 2 years. Whether you compare $21,234.18 to $63,636, or if you compare $5,915.81 to $1,974, you get the same ratio. Real GDP per capita is about 3 times bigger in 2020 than in 1950. Here's an example I like to use to differentiate between real and nominal values, because we can adjust any dollar amounts for inflation the same way as GDP. Take these 2 movies. Gone with the Wind was released in 1939, and it made $189,523,031 in its initial theatrical run. It was a box office sensation, but in 2015, Star Wars The Force Awakens managed to gross $936,662,225 in its initial theatrical run, quite a bit more than Gone with the Wind. Those are the nominal values for box office gross. But instead, we could compare their real values. First, note that in 1939, the average ticket price was around 94 cents. In 2015, the average ticket price was $8.43. So let's divide each nominal value by its price level. When you divide the box office grosses by the average ticket price, you get the number of tickets sold to each film. Already we can see Gone with the Wind sold a lot more tickets than The Force Awakens. But this is analogous to real GDP. Nominal GDP is the market value of all final goods and services. But real GDP is a measure of the quantity of goods and services we are producing. It's more like the number of tickets sold to a movie than it is like the amount of money a movie made at the box office. And if we take the last step of multiplying by the prices in our destination year, in this case I chose 2015, we get the real value for the box office gross for Gone with the Wind using 2015 prices. This real value for Gone with the Wind is now directly comparable to the nominal value for The Force Awakens. So, while at the time of this recording, The Force Awakens holds the domestic box office record, we can see that adjusted for inflation, Gone with the Wind did better, and is indeed the highest grossing film when we do account for inflation. But if you want my advice, I'd watch Star Wars.